Um, we found on the shores of this lake I guess it was a sea cadet training cutter that had been partly burned away. We also found some German engineers' supplies, including the funniest rig for an outboard motor for propelling rafts across water crossings, and consisted of a cradle housing just a framework cradle housing a motor that drove through a right-angled transmission down into a propeller shaft, and the shaft was a separate, you could hook the two things up together and just sit the power plant on the raft and fasten the, with some clamps that were supplied with the propeller shaft. And you had yourself propulsion for some kind of craft. Well, we took this cutter and we fitted this propulsion gear on it, and we we put a mast up in the front of the boat and a piece of dirty tarpaulin for our flag. We called it the HMS Dirty Tarp, and we used to use that to get around the lake. Indeed, we went fishing one day with hand grenades, which would have been frowned on by the brass had they known what we were doing. But we got a pretty good crop of fish, which Charlie ate with relish. I wouldn't touch them. They were carp and the kind of fish that I turned my nose up at. But not so Charlie. He thoroughly enjoyed a feast of fish, fresh fish, freshly caught. What happened was the grenade would stun the fish, it would, or kill it, but mostly stun it. The fish would arrive at the surface belly up, and some of them would stay that way, others of them would just gradually start to move so that they were picking up a little oxygen through their gills, and they'd revive. Oh, another of our stunts there was we found a Molotov cocktail. A Molotov cocktail was a German incendiary bomb, which was one huge bomb, which by centrifugal force, because it had a tail arrangement that made it spin, when it got high enough velocity of spin, it sprung open and spewed out as many as 500 incendiary bombs. And Charlie and I used to think it was great fun to take one of these incendiary bombs and throw it up in the air and let it land on the runway, because it was there's an aircraft runway there, and listen to it snap, and then burst into most brilliant flame. It was
phosphorus?
Not phosphorus, no. Not titanium, but magnesium.
Oh yes.
Magnesium bombs, and oh my, they're brilliant. It's well, it's the stuff that they used to use for original daguerreotype flash pans for taking photographs. After a while, we got bored with that. We figured we needed a little bit bigger bang and a little brighter light. So we made a bonfire of about 75 or 100 of these incendiaries, and put a couple of sealed jerry cans into the bonfire and then ran like hell. And when the jerry can got hot enough with the gas fumes that were from the remaining gas in the gasoline, petrol in the jerry can, it would explode and ignite with a pretty good bang, a pretty good fireworks we had. Well, the best lark we played or got involved in is I was roomed. Charlie was in a room upstairs. I was in the ground floor, and I had a room right next to a fellow who turned out to be Britain, or Europe's greatest liberator. And amongst the things he liberated was an enormous, at that stage, hi-fi Telefunken radio gramophone. And he had this in his room. And this fellow was Captain Joe Attio. And Joe and I shared the same Batman. And Joe and my Batman figured we could have some good fun with Joe if Charlie would work with us. So we very laboriously drilled a hole through the concrete wall between Joe's room and my room, and it was about a foot thick, and it was a bit of a trick to drill that tiny hole through. And we passed a pair of annunciator wires through that, and we hooked the one end of the annunciator wires into the speech circuit of the Telefunken behemoth, and the other end of the line I hooked into a field phone. And my Batman, or Joe and my Batman, had liberated a very small desk radio, which I had on the windowsill in my room. And so I could, if we had Joe's speech circuit on, and my field phone on, and my little radio on, I could hold the mouthpiece of the field phone in front of my radio and have it come out in very hi-fi fashion out of, and blaring out of Joe's set. I could do anything I wanted then. I could fade out my radio and then speak as if I were the announcer. So we had things pretty well set up, and Charlie was in making some final adjustments, and Joe said, when not Joe, but another of the officers of our unit walked in looking for Joe, and he saw Charlie in there, and Charlie says, gee, I don't know what, this fellow's name was Kerr, Don Kerr. And Joe said to, or Charlie said to Don Kerr, I don't know what the hell's coming off here, Don. I just heard something I don't believe. And the Batman gave me the signal. And I had, as Charlie was going across the dial, he hit the spot where I was just coming in with full strength with the Canadian Forces Network program, which was pure music. And I played that for a little while, and Charlie says, here, we'll see if we get it again. And the signal came through, and I faded out and picked up the handset to the field phone, and I said something as follows. We interrupt this program to bring you a bulletin of grave national importance to all Canadians serving overseas. It has just been announced from Ottawa that Canadian troops are to be disbanded immediately. I repeat, disbanded immediately, and are to find their own way home. We repeat this entire announcement because of its great importance. And I repeated it, and then said, we return you now to your regularly scheduled program. I put the mouthpiece of the phone up to the speaker of the little radio, turned the radio volume up, and left it like that. Well, at about that point, Don Kerr went out like an arrow, running and sprinting as hard as he could for the officers' mess.